to From Clinical to Entrepreneurial, OT Private Practice Journeys, an Ontario Society of Occupational Therapists podcast. In this series, we connect with occupational therapists, private practitioners, and business owners, and we hear about their inspiration, their stories, and their lessons learned. I'm Seema Sandwani, OSOT's Director of Strategic Partnerships and Practice. If you've ever wondered how to find, target, and connect with your ideal clients, or struggled with slow business growth after launch, this episode is for you. Join my co-host Shari and I as we talk with Lara Desrosiers, an OT who has worked in community mental health for over 10 years. She ventured into private practice in the field of pelvic health in 2016. Hello, and welcome to our private practice podcast, Lara. It's great to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that OSOT is doing this podcast, and I'm excited to come on and chat.
Well, we're excited to hear all about your practice and all about your business.
Yeah, we've got lots of ground to cover in the next little bit. And so before we jump into the entrepreneurial pieces, Lara, we just want to learn a little bit about you. If you could let us know where you did your OT degree, how long you've been practicing as an OT, anything about your professional journey before you took the leap into the business world.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a McMaster grad. So I graduated in 2009. And since graduating, I've worked in community mental health settings. So my first job was at an outpatient community mental health program and a first episode of psychosis program. And then I transitioned into assertive community treatment team for many, many years until I had my babies. And then while I was starting my private practice, I worked as a consultant with another community mental health and addictions program. So very much mental health, addictions, first episode psychosis kind of background. Yeah.
And I'm curious to know, because that's really evolved into pelvic health as well.
It has, yeah. And so that has a lot to do with kind of my personal journey through having babies and having my own pelvic health challenges. Yeah, and so I really struggled with my pelvic health after having babies and did see a pelvic health physiotherapist who was absolutely phenomenal. And helped me kind of get back to the sports and everything that I loved. I've always been a very active person. But we started to have conversations, she and I, because there were so many ways that my pelvic health became intertwined with my mental health. And all of the things that I needed and wanted to do to adjust to motherhood as well. And so my brain started marinating in all the ways I could see an OT role in supporting other folks struggling with their pelvic health. And so I really had never had any intention of going into private practice whatsoever.
I was the same way.
That's
I
a common
do not
story.
know why I'm here.
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah, it's such an emerging field that there aren't really positions in public health for OT really available. So it was really my only option if I wanted to explore what the OT role could look like in that space.
I'm ready to launch into. Tell me about that.
Shari, launch it. I wanted to say thank you for being so open and transparent about sharing your personal journey. So Shari, go please.
And I thank you for that too. However, I'm really curious to know sort of what you came up with in terms of how you merged those together.
Yeah, so a lot of conversations, I will say, with my physiotherapist, and then it was really on my second maternity leave, where I started to take a lot of courses alongside pelvic health physiotherapists to learn.
We have parallel lives. My maternity leaves were my times too.
Yeah, to really kind of explore. And I will say one of the pieces to that was at the time I was working for an assertive community treatment team. And after my first maternity leave, I really struggled with work-life balance when I transitioned back to work, and started to realize that this role was not something that would be sustainable for me
Right.
to be a mom. I just didn't have the capacity to be so present with my clients as I was pre-kids, and then have enough left at the end of the day to be really
Right.
present
Yeah.
with my kiddos. And so I was already thinking about, I want to take a new path. And so, yeah, it was that maternity leave that I launched into learning more about persistent pain, learning more about pelvic health, and talking to these physios who were identifying this massive gap and feeling like they had this pressure on them to address more of these psychosocial pieces, but not feeling equipped to do that. And so it really was this just, I don't know what the word is, but it was this, it evolved, and I could see a very clear gap that I could fill with my mental health skills in supporting folks that were struggling with their pelvic health.
So tell us a little bit about now some of the details, I guess, around the business. How long have you
Yeah.
been in business? What's the name of your business?
Yeah.
What's the business structure, the ownership structure? Give us a little bit of this sort of the nitty gritty, I'll say.
Sure. It has evolved in so many ways since I first got started. I will say I started very naive when it came to all things business, all things marketing, um,
Yes.
things that were,
Shari, sound familiar?
Oh, yeah,
Right? She's
absolutely.
singing your song. I know. Yeah.
very outside my comfort zone. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
again, it was after my second maternity leave, and I decided I wasn't going to go back to my position. And so, very privileged that we had a bit of savings so that I could give myself space to kind of test the waters and feel this out. But it was very much like, okay, build a website, talk to other OTs and network about like what platforms do I use for EMR, where do I rent space, where do I want to see clients, considering all of those pieces, opening up my doors, and then crickets, right? No one's no one's coming for such a long time.
That's
Yes.
And
frustrating.
so then it was really diving into a lot of learning that I invested in terms of marketing and how do I really kind of sell myself? How do I really network with potential referral sources to start getting folks in my door? And that took a lot longer than I had anticipated, but it's getting there. And it's there.
I have some questions, Laura.
Yeah.
So first of all, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Blue Ocean. I believe it's called Blue Ocean Strategies, something to that effect, which
Oh,
I really liked it because you have done it. The theme of the book is pretty much you don't want to go head to head with everybody else who's doing the same thing in the market. Like, where's the gap where there's no
right.
service and where
Right.
people need you? So you find the gap. But then the challenge with that is, of course, now you find the gap. What do you're like, how do you tell people that they need to do something within that gap and
Right.
so on? But you can find your audience easily in the gap and then you're more unique.
Right.
But I'm that marketing piece is so huge. So what did you do? Because I know that the other therapists listening to this are going to be like, okay, but how? But where? But
Yes.
what do I do?
Tangibly, what did you do?
Yeah,
100%
what
agree,
course
Shari.
did you take? Where'd you go? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is such a good question. I will say I don't think the course that I took is still available, unfortunately. But I'm happy to share like some of the key mistakes that I made and some of the key strategies that I used.
Perfect.
One of the courses that I took was perinatal mental health course with an OT based out of British Columbia named Melissa Lapointe. And her course was so beautiful because not only did it introduce us to kind of the OT role in perinatal health, but also integrated some business education. How do I start up a private
Yeah,
practice to work with the
great.
population? And so one of the things that I really struggled with while I was taking a lot of these courses alongside physios and learning these new techniques that overlapped with what a physio role might
Yeah.
look like is really struggling with like trying to be in that role and kind of losing my way in terms of fine-tuning what my OT role could be. And so I found myself struggling to, as we do as OTs who are trained as generalists, wanting to speak to everybody and wanting to tell everybody who might be struggling with their pelvic health how I could serve them. And one of the things Melissa spoke about in her course was this idea of bullseye marketing. So figuring out who your ideal client is. And I felt I had so much resistance to that. At first, and I do mentor many other OTs starting their private practice, and this is the real kind of hiccup that we get into, and we don't want to not speak to people who we know we could serve. But the problem with that is if we try to speak with everyone, our message doesn't land with anyone. And so the idea with bullseye marketing is really trying to zero in your messaging to that ideal client that you really want to serve, acknowledging that when we do that, we're going to get other clients that kind of smatter outside the bullseye, that some part of our message still resonates with them, but we will more and more consistently have a message around how we can help someone who's really struggling with specific challenges, when we let ourselves get much more specific and kind of zero in on our zone of excellence, as I like
And so it's not diluting, it's creating that niche we're
yeah,
talking about, right? And it's not
Yes, yeah.
diluting the messaging. So Laura, you've got your doors open, you've got your
yeah.
bullseye marketing, and then what are you doing? Are you on social media? Or who are you talking to? Because that's such a big part of the business, is promoting it and getting the word out there. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, and so that that has evolved immensely too. I would say one of the transitions that I had to go through was I really struggled with the idea of really, do I rent space in a clinic, or do I have some sort of percentage split agreement with a clinic where it's
Yeah.
really aligned with what I'm doing? And I don't know why, but I was quite stubborn in wanting to not give up a percentage of my revenue with clients at the onset of my business. So I was really set on this idea of renting space. But have come to an appreciation of that percentage split and working in a clinic that's really aligned with what I want to do, because then they've got some skin in the game in terms of supporting me with my marketing efforts as well. And so
Right.
now I am at a women's health clinic. I get the bulk of my referrals right in-house from the physiotherapists that work there. Um, so it's become much less effortful in terms of
Yeah.
marketing. I
There's a
can
lot to be said for those strategic partnerships
get
when
100.
we, yeah, and it depends. And I will say, because I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, but it depends with the strategic partnerships, because sometimes it's like, do you just want to make an income? And do you just want to do well and know your kids are taken care of and so on? Or is it because you want to build a brand and grow the brand? Because in those circumstances, it's a very different approach. If all you care about is like, let's just make sure I can eat tonight, strategic partnerships, I don't care, stick your logo on my report, it's fine. Versus you want a brand, you're not letting that go for anything. So it does
Yeah,
have a lot of influence on where you want to take your business.
it really does. And I will say, I think that's kind of where the importance for me has been in eventually finding those clinics and clinic spaces where that vision in terms of what I see and want for my brand is aligned. Uh,
Right.
I've been in clinics earlier on in my business where we did have that percentage split arrangement, but they had a very clear picture of what they wanted me to be and do.
Yeah.
which wasn't aligned with where I saw my practice going. And one of the things I have begun to value more and more about private practice is that I get to be in control, that I get
Right.
to have that agency of allowing my practice to evolve, to be aligned with my values, and to be fulfilling for me.
And when you're talking about that evolution, I'm curious to know what you think. If you went back to the beginning, would you have said, would you still at this point think, I'm starting, I'm going to take what I can get while I'm building and be more
Good
picky as I
question.
go? Or do you wish you'd been more picky from the start, even though it may have meant more crickets for a while?
I honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. I think there is so much. I'm sure I would do it completely differently now that I've learned so much along the way. But if I hadn't made so many mistakes through trial and error or not being so picky early on, that I wouldn't have all of the lived experience knowledge that I've developed
Right.
the way through that, which has made me a much better mentor, right? For how
Yes.
supporting other bees
And
wanting.
supposing that the person asking you this question is just about to get started and saying, what do I do? Or maybe he's been doing this for 10 years and is,
And
I
something's not
think,
working. How,
yeah, the
what do I
values
do? Yeah.
alignment isn't there, which I think
Yes.
is super important phrase you
Yeah.
used. Because if the values alignment isn't there, we're not happy as people. And
Yeah.
then, maybe
You're
you're
not
making
fulfilled.
money, but life sucks.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you're not doing the best job you can do for
That's
your patients
it.
and clients or for yourself and your fam. Like everything is connected, right?
That's right.
right. And so one of the approaches that I use as a clinician, but I also use a lot that helped me get my private practice started and that I use a lot in supporting other clinicians is acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah.
That is all about um, that values alignment, right? And moving towards what we're needing and wanting in all aspects of our lives. But in this case, we're talking about our professional lives, right? And so a lot of what I will do if a clinician is asking me that question is getting curious with them about what those values are. What do they want their practice to look like so that we have a clear kind of compass or direction for where we're wanting to go. And then also looking at what are the biggest kind of fears or worries that are keeping you stuck from moving in that direction or making a change. And often, if we can look at those fears and worries, and see if we can kind of unhook from them a little bit so we keep those values front and center, we gain so much clarity in terms of what our next steps need to be or how we can pivot to move towards that, where those changes are. And so I think it really depends on what your vision is for your practice and getting clear about it. I don't think you have to have all the answers right away. I think we get lost in the sauce when we try and figure out all of the pieces. I think it's about really finding that clarity of what's my next best step right now that's going to move me a bit closer to that vision that I've worked to get some clarity around.
And
The
it's
best
impossible
possible.
not to make mistakes. Sorry, Shar. I was just going to say it's
Yeah.
impossible
No,
not to make mistakes. And it's really
absolutely.
to both of your comments, even Shari, when we were talking during the first few episodes, it was really about kind of what you said, Laura. I wouldn't change a thing necessarily
Yeah.
because I used all of those experiences to help me grow as a person, as a professional, and better make decisions going forward,
Yeah.
I think.
Well,
Yeah.
my entire business practice has been a mistake. Like there's been no intention. I'm just like, but
Let's go.
I wanted to jump back really quickly to something that we talked about just as like a practical tip. And hopefully, Laura, you've got some other ones for, say a new therapist or someone who's working on sort of brushing up using those bullseye marketing concepts, because that is challenging, right? You've got the
Yeah.
clinician who's trying to figure that out. So my quick tip is I tell my best friends that they are in jeopardy of being bumped because my true new best friend is ChatGPT. And you can have a conversation with ChatGPT. It's free to get the cheap version. get the no cost version, sorry. And you can just go in and you can just type in, this is what I do. This is my best client. These are the kinds that I have the most effect with. Can you create a profile for me for my client? And you can just have that conversation with it and refine. I'm telling you, you can get through this in a half hour or less. You can take longer if you want. Then you have the profile. Then when you're trying to get started with social media posts and blogs and all that kind of stuff, and you're not entirely sure, you say, please write a blog. This is my business. Here's my website. This is the client that I'm trying to speak to. Write a blog with 4 social media posts affiliated with that blog. Then you take the blog, obviously, you reword it and you make it the way you want it to be, but then you've got that, then you've got the 2 social media posts, and you can set that up to run every 2 weeks. So automatically you've got a blog up every 2 weeks, and you've got 2 social media posts. You can get a Canva account so you can come up with a quick and easy picture to go with it, and then you've got basic. I mean, I'm not telling you this is going to open your doors to thousands of clients, but it's just a really practical get started tip as you're building your skills. A social media manager or someone who's in marketing is going to have way more strategies than that, but it's something. So Laura, I'm curious to know what some of your like practical marketing tips are from that perspective as well.
Well, I also have been like diving down deep into AI rabbit
Yeah.
hole and making my life in that way as efficient as possible. In terms of the bullseye marketing, I think my biggest tip is, as you're looking at your ideal client and who that is, really getting clear about what are their biggest pain points and struggles. What are they kind of searching for a solution for on Google, and getting really clear on what the transformation is that we're offering to them with the services that we're providing. And that, for me, was just a really useful formula for developing my communication when I get on a discovery call with clients. Early on, I really got lost in the mess of trying to explain everything that an occupational therapist is and does. And so I think my biggest tip is seeing if you can let go of that struggle a little bit and focus on what you can offer to the people that are going to come through their doors. And that formula of pain points and transformation can help us get really clear on that that tagline or that elevator speech that you are presenting to your clients in those free discovery calls that I use I think that's the best way to kind of form that connection and get folks in my doors. But doing the same with potential referrers. As you're reaching out to potential referrers, consider not what their clients' biggest pain points are, but what their biggest pain point is as a provider, and where they're going to be looking for support, where they could refer off to you. And so I allow use that formula to help inform the conversations that I have with those providers. And I think, to your point, Shari, using ChatGPT, the other thing that I really struggled with early on is like, which platforms do I go? Like, there's just so many places.
There's too many options.
And so instead of kind of blowing with the wind of trying to do all the things, the other really useful question is, if I consider my niche client, where are they hanging out primarily? What are the platforms that they're using? Because those are the platforms that I really want to focus on getting some consistent content to.
And there's an age component to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we have to get right. Like, you're not going to get a young client if you're on Facebook.
I know, it's sad. Lara, do you provide remote services as well, or is it strictly in person?
Yeah, I provide remote services and in-person services. Right now, I would say the bulk of my clients are in person in the Guelph KW area, but I also get, because I also teach many pelvic health physios, I do get referrals from across the province where I could do virtual support as well.
And Lara, do you, every time you say something, I'm writing down more questions because I think we need like, I
It's
think we need
great.
7 podcasts with you. However, do you have online booking on your website, or do they email you and you set up a discovery call that way?
So the clinic where I offer my clinical services has an online booking system through Jane, and so they
Okay, we use Jane
client,
too.
yeah, I love Jane. So
Yeah.
clients can book either an initial assessment or that free discovery call.
Okay. And this is just the practical pain point question because I encountered this too. You mentioned what are your clients Googling? So I'm
Right.
wondering what software, what platforms are you using to find that out? Because I've used one in the past. I can't remember the name and I'll have it ready so we can
Put it on our
provide it
site.
when
Yeah.
that's right. But you have, I believe it's 5 to 6 free searches a month or something to that effect, where you can just search, traumatic brain injury, and it will tell you all the top Google searches related to that topic.
Oh, I wasn't
Yeah.
aware. Yes,
Yeah. So I'm
I'm not
curious to
that
know how you've
tech.
done it. Oh, I just, I love technology because it just makes your life so much easier. And I guess I'm lazy and I don't know what I'm doing. So I rely on, you know, Google and AI for everything
I've
and
not
other
done.
talented people.
Again, Shari, it's not lazy, it's smart.
Sure,
It's not about
sure.
work, right? It's working smarter.
So yeah, Laura, how did you figure out those pain points? Or how do you recommend people do that research?
Well, I think there's so many ways to do it. I think there are so many great tech tools that I just can't keep up with to support us with that. Honestly, I did it through conversations and through surveying my ideal client and kind of understanding the language. And one of the business courses that I did recommended surveying
Yeah,
your clientele and asking, keeping it really simple and asking 3 questions. I'm not going to be able to recall what all of them are off the top of my head, but essentially, what are those pain points? What are your biggest
right.
struggles? What are your biggest worries? Um, what are the gaps in terms of what you're looking for in terms
Okay,
of support? To really kind of piece out what is this common language that
right,
folks think that I can turn into how I'm trying to reach them and how I'm trying
right. And
to.
did you do that with your existing clients? Or did you go to sort of those partner physios that you had and have them ask their clients?
Yeah, and so it was just posting on like my personal Facebook accounts, like getting
Okay.
I in that stage of life has so many friends that were also going
Yes.
through similar things.
Sure.
Good point, right? Yeah.
So it was just really using my personal connections to gather that information about where folks were at. And my like target audience at that time, because it was aligned with my personal pelvic health challenges, was pelvic organ prolapse. So I was also in a lot of Facebook support groups for folks
Okay.
with prolapse. So I didn't necessarily survey in those groups. I didn't want to. It just didn't feel
Yeah.
right because
Those,
that's
and just for other people doing this, those groups do not like it when you bust in there with marketing
oh,
and
it,
promotion.
it's not
So
No,
it's like a
it's not
no-no.
meant
It's
for
going to turn
that.
everyone
No.
off.
no.
Yeah.
No.
It's
Yeah, it's
so
not meant for that.
tempting because you're like, but they're all right there, but they don't like it.
No, and
So, Laura, you've talked a
they're
little
there.
bit. Sorry, I was just going to say you've talked a little bit about referrals, right? And so a component of your business in terms of the referrals comes from the physiotherapist or other folks at the clinic. Are there other referral sources you can talk to us about? And if there are, kind of what your processes are in terms of, does that paperwork, I'll call it, even though it's electronic, differ from, an individual?
Paperwork, you mean?
In terms of your process with those third party funders or third party
Oh,
referrals. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't, in terms of third-party funders, I don't have a lot
Nothing there. Okay.
in my
Yeah.
practice. So the bulk of my clients are either have extended health benefits or are paying out of pocket.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I do get the occasional, like, had insurers sometimes look mental health OTs contact me. And so I've done a few clients through third party, through if they're on long-term disability or short-term disability. Um, so I guess in terms of other referrers, one of the processes at the clinic where I'm at that they do, which I think is a beautiful strategy, is they will take kind of some common themes on a quarterly basis and then reach out to primary care teams as well and send out some information, like some up-to-date research around, say, uh, men's pelvic health or menopause or postpartum challenges, and we'll send those out to primary care provider, kind of a fact sheet, some up-to-date research.
Almost like an info newsletter kind of a thing.
Mm.
And
Okay.
alongside that, that's a great opportunity. They always kind of reach out to me. Is there anything that you want to offer from an OT
Contribute.
perspective in
Right.
packages? And so that gets me kind of paired with these really aligned partners around here's what I can create a pamphlet, use my ChatGPT friend to create a
Yes.
thank you resource that goes out.
So I know that I'm asking too many questions, and you may not know the answer to this question, but we've certainly encountered when it comes to family health teams, a lot of them don't have an email address. The doctors are always like, we're overwhelmed. A lot of them will say fax this information when you get it, but no one's going to read it. So you may not know the answer to this question, but I'm curious to know what their strategy has been in terms of collaborating with them. Because, you can always find a couple different clinics to collaborate with, but big picture, they're so overworked. They're like, just don't give me anything more. Or give me something, I'll put it in the coffee room. If anybody sees, they see. So that's always been a bit of a barrier for us when it comes to physicians. I'm curious to know your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it a little bit on my own, kind of pounding the pavement
Yeah.
before joining forces with this clinic, and certainly ran into that obstacle. It was hard to
Yeah.
get in the door, but there was the odd client that came through because
That's
I
right.
think the best strategy for those cases is sending the RAC cards, the pamphlets, right? The
Yeah.
things that they can just kind of implant and put in front of their clients'
That's right.
faces. So my strategy has always been, and I think our clinic does something similar, is kind of have that letter, that FAQ sheet geared towards the provider, but then include that marketing material that's geared
Yeah.
towards the client, that if they don't have time to read, they can just plop it there. So at least you could get some traction. But certainly, yeah,
Yeah.
it is a big obstacle to kind of
Yeah. And I
get
think it's
that.
more the budgeting component, right? Because anyone starting is going to be like, okay, I've only got this much money from marketing. Where is it best spent?
Right.
My experience, and I'd love to know yours, but in my experience, aside from the whole voice thing, in services, some doctors' clinics, some social media, and so on, blogs and so on has really been, and those strategic partnerships. That's
Yeah.
really been where we found our growth. What about you?
Yeah, well, for me, I think it has been a little bit of that trial and error, like reaching out to everyone at the start and
Yeah.
then seeing where you're getting the most traction and zeroing in on those folks and providing that consistent contact on a more regular basis with those folks. So
So
for me, it has been pelvic health physiotherapist has been
it's
my
been
Right.
partnerships for you.
Yes.
It's been those partnerships. Okay, that's great to
Let's
know.
Yeah. And so I'm just thinking about all the different avenues we can take this podcast and how many questions. And Laura, we certainly might
Yes,
have to have you back. I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
absolutely.
One
Yes.
thing I think folks are always interested in hearing about is fee setting. How,
Yes.
how do you determine, or how did you determine what to charge folks? Were there resources you pulled on for that? Do you adopt a sliding scale depending on your client? So we'd love to hear a little bit from you on that whole fee structure piece.
Oh gosh, yes.
I
Yeah.
know.
That was such a challenge for me. And like even before fee setting, like the concept of asking people for money for my services after working in the public health sector for my whole career,
It's that
but
money
the
mindset.
money
That's
mindset
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
was a challenge. Um, and I also found it really challenging because there wasn't really an OT practice like mine out there.
Yes.
I could kind of compare or get a sense.
Mirror in any way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so really the other OTs around me that I had to look at were pediatric OTs, primarily pediatric
Yeah.
practices. And there was such a massive range. Like
Yeah.
some were up kind of closer to $200 for a session, and some were like under $100 for a session. So I was like,
Mm.
what do I do? And so what I looked at instead is that niche client again. Where are they getting their healthcare services already, and how much are they being charged for those healthcare services in those other spaces to help me kind of come to
Okay.
a place of where I felt I
Okay.
could. And so I looked at pelvic health physiotherapy fees, and I also looked at psychotherapy fees because I knew that would be a big part of what I would do in my practice, and tried to find a middle ground of those to land where I was at. And I certainly probably started charging much lower, and a bit of that was imposter syndrome and not really being sure at the start. Um, and it probably was 3 or 4 years in before I was ready to kind of review my pricing and take that leap of realizing, okay, I need to review this every year and increase them based on what my expenses are, where inflation is going, all of all of those lovely things.
So I have two, well, 17, but for now, two follow-up
We'll go with
questions.
two. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm also looking at the time. They'll be quick, I hope. Um, One is, so do you personally use Jane as well? Is that how you send your invoices, or do you use a different platform?
Well, now it's all through the clinic, Jane's platform, and clients get invoiced through
Okay.
but when I was working on my own, I bounced through a few different platforms, but always landed back at Jane and used that to
Okay.
send.
Mm. Okay.
Okay. And for those listening, most clinic management software do have those kinds of invoicing options as well.
Options. Yeah.
My second question was when you were talking about your pricing and how you readjust. I'm curious to know what's your model because, like when we look at, what we're paying our therapists and so on, we have sort of this is 100% of our hourly rate and it's minus admin and it's minus operating costs and it's minus all these different factors, marketing and so on. And then we're left with like our goal profit because we're trying to, be grown up business people and maintain that we have a certain percentage profit because otherwise businesses go under. So I'm curious to know if that's a strategy that you similarly use when you're determining, because it's just you, correct? You don't have employees at this point in time.
I do
So,
have a VA, but
okay. Oh, darn it, because that's another topic that would be great to talk about. VA, for
We'll make
those who
note
are
of that
not,
one for next
yeah,
time. Let's have you talk
it's
about your
absolutely.
structure.
I'll
Your
just
fee
say
structure.
VA is a virtual assistant for those who
Yeah,
are
thank you.
wondering.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
So yes, Lara, I'd love to hear about how you determine that and if you have a specific percentage profit that you go for or
oh, I wish I could say I was even that grown up about it. I certainly am not. I So my process is because my business overall has so many different branches now, my clinical practice is just one small piece of the puzzle. I look at my expenses and my income on an annual basis and kind of look at where I'm at versus it probably would be a good idea to look at that pricing structure a little bit more closely, but I have not got to a place where I've broken that down in that way. It's just more looked at, am I meeting my needs, looking at my business expenses overall every year versus what my revenue is with all of these
Okay.
different projects and that I have these different revenue streams within my business. And from there, think about like where can I reduce expenses that I'm not using, and where do I need to um, relook at some of that pricing structure, whether it's my clinical
Okay.
services, whether it's some of the courses that I have. Like I kind of look at it all big picture every year.
So it's sort of like an annual review where you sort of look at what are my operating expenses? Can I decrease? Did I make enough money this year to sort
Right,
of meet my needs? And if I didn't, where do I tweak a little more here, a little less here, etc.?
right,
And do you
exactly.
have a target income that you want to make each year that you work toward? Or is it more, I'm only asking because, sometimes it's like, oh, that was nice what you got, at the end of the year. And
What was
other,
planned? What was a happy stance? What was,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's
I
right.
right.
do. So every year I do kind of look at where I'm at and consider what's a realistic goal in terms of
Okay.
the coming year, where I want to increase that, but increase it in a way that feels achievable, that doesn't feel
Right.
like too overwhelming, and that meets mine and my family's needs.
Yeah.
Always trying to
Okay.
grow, but in a realistic way.
Yeah.
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 Right. Makes sense. So I'm going to shift us to maybe two last questions, Lara, in terms of, things that we want to pick your brain on here. I think we've got a myriad of folks that are probably joining and listening to this podcast, people that have been in private practice or business owners for several years, and and then folks that are just starting out or considering starting out. And we've talked a little bit earlier, the three of us, about taking that leap. So we know many OTs are in the public health system. That sector is very, very different. There's so many things to consider. Are you making a salary that has vacation, that has sick time? And then you take this plunge, you make this huge shift, and all of that kind of goes away to a degree, that
Yeah.
security. Talk to us. You're nodding, and I know Shari probably feels the same way. So talk to us a little bit about overcoming those hurdles, or overcoming those challenges, and anything that you can impart to our listeners about how to go through that, how to
Yeah.
deal with that.
Right. And I think that was such an obstacle for me, particularly letting go of that sick time and that vacation time. And so I think my biggest piece of advice around that is really sitting down and looking at the numbers. As uncomfortable as that can be, I think it's so necessary to really lay out what your plans are, um, what your expenses are going to look like, what you're hoping for in terms of income. Um, and then looking at what vacation time do you want, what sick time do you need kind of realistically. And so I did that with my partner before going into practice. We looked at kind of our savings to see, okay, what is this buffer time that we can
Yeah.
afford to give me? And then where do we need to be in terms of income? Um, and so when I was able to look at the numbers and look at my rates and how many clients I would need to see to kind of make things work, I then could also look at annually, if I factor in so many weeks of vacation, so many weeks of sick time, it helped really kind of ease my mind that I could still take that time and have that work-life balance that I needed and wanted with this leap. It was just reframing my mindset around like taking time unpaid, because I knew I was being paid because I was putting all this time into my business and I could afford to take this space off.
And it really does help to have either the partner who's still got that steady job
Oh
or the
yes.
savings that you talked about. Because for my situation, when I made the switch over, my husband well, still my husband, but at the time, my husband was working full-time job for another company. Our challenge, which what you said sparked a memory in me, because our challenge was when he joined my practice, because that's when we sat down and we did the math. And I had clients, I had more clients than I could handle. I told Seema last time, I was like at the laying on the floor, desperately like, oh my gosh, I can't get up period of time when he was like, I remember it distinctly, lying there in the living room while my husband finally said, okay, I'll join you. But it was down to like, how many clients at this compensation do we need to see per week to cover your time? And
Right.
when we ran that math, we were like, okay, so all we need is X number of clients.
Right.
Surely in Ottawa, there's that many clients based on the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So that was how we had a comfort level in making that switch, because he was the one, it wasn't me. I was already in private practice. He was the one who had to switch over. And it sounds like it was a similar math experiment to you, Lara.
It was. Yeah, it was. And I will say I didn't hit kind of where I wanted to be in that buffer that we laid out. And so for me, that meant finding a part-time regular
Elsewhere. Yeah.
gig again.
Yeah.
And doing that, but not letting my practice go, just shifting how it was going to
Yeah.
work for a little bit while I built up that traction. And so I think, yes, I was so privileged to have a husband that had that steady job. But I want to say too that there are other ways I think to pivot and kind of make it.
And it sounds like you're looking at it as a whole, right? It's pieces that you've put together as a whole to give you that balcony view of what's the year look like. So I could take some vacation, and if I, for whatever reason need a bit of sick time, I'm looking at it kind of as a year, as an annual thing.
Right.
Okay, so now to take us out, Lara, what we want to hear from you is, what is the best thing about having your own practice, having your own business, being an entrepreneur? Tell us the best thing, if there's one that you could name.
Can I name two?
Name two. I like the negotiation.
No.
You're a good negotiator.
So two best things for me, and why I wouldn't change it for the world, are that agency, that I'm in charge, that if I'm feeling like there's a change I want to make, I don't have to go through a bunch of red tape to make it. Like it's just me. Not just me. I mean, there's so many partnerships within that too that help make it go, but just the agency of knowing that change can happen and I can facilitate that change without coming up against roadblocks. But the other big thing for me is that flexibility for mom life. And my son made a rep basketball team this year, and there's so much travel and tournaments involved. And I'm just so grateful for myself from 2017 for starting this, because I can do that. I can set my schedule. I can go to tournaments. It's a beautiful thing.
We never have missed an elementary school concert, even when we really, really wanted to. We couldn't because we did have the flexibility. Yeah, there's something good to be saying that. Yeah,
for sure. And, as a rep mom myself, I do think that work-life balance is really difficult to achieve, regardless of whether you're a business owner or in a salaried position. I think we carry a bit of that guilt and feel stretched in so many ways. This has been an absolute pleasure. Shari, thank you for being an awesome co-host with me.
Oh, it was great.
It was great.
And it was
Lara,
so great to meet you, Lara. I loved it. I have so many more questions.
Yeah. I think, Lara, it's been such a pleasure. I think our audience members will undoubtedly learn a ton from you. Absolutely. And we'll be happy to post any other resources that you think would be beneficial to our listeners. And we can post that in our description. And we wish you much success. We'll follow your success. And we thank you so much and hope you have a great rest of your day. Our conversation with Lara in particular felt like an interview with sort of an every OT. The variety of guests we've had on our show has been wonderful. Next week is no exception. Join us as we interview Trisha Morrison, whose OT journey has come full circle. Visit the episode description for links to resources that we discussed and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.